In a recent UK debate, a politician called for a ban on first cousin marriages. Whilst technically legal, such unions have been socially condemned and nearly non existent in Britain for centuries. However, large scale immigration has led to a troubling rise in the practice with severe social and health consequences, particularly for children born out of those relationships. Surprisingly, the proposed ban does not have unanimous support. Several Muslim MPs oppose it, and without saying it, their reason is obvious. Because banning first cousin marriages would conflict with Islamic principles, because it will ban what Allah explicitly allows. This highlights a deeper issue because while some claim first cousin marriages is cultural, religion plays a central role in its prevalence. This video is not intended to spread hate, but to educate on the risks of consanguineous relationships and the role of religion in perpetuating them. Without addressing these root causes, meaningful solutions will remain out of reach. I also do want to show that it's not just first cousin marriages that Islam has an issue with. So in the Quran 4:23, Allah tells men what women and children are permissible for them. He says your daughters are forbidden. In Quran 25:54, Allah says that lineage is established by blood and marriage. This means the presence of both factors are required to establish ancestry. In this hadith, Muhammad says a child is attributable to the bed and not the fornicator, adulterer. The bed refers to the marital bed to mean marriage. And this hadith makes it explicitly clear lineage established by that marital bed is only referring to the husband. In other words, paternity between the father and the child is only established within a lawful marriage. So if a lady is married but gives birth to a child born out of adultery, so she cheats on her husband, the child will automatically still be attributed to a husband unless there's an admission or evidence, clear evidence of adultery. So even if the husband has been absent for 20 years, his wife's newborn will be his. So in Islamic law, a child will only be attributed to a male who's married, and Islam is obviously prioritizing marital ties over biology itself. The child is obviously always going to be attributed to the mother because she gives physical birth to the child, but a child born to a man out of wedlock will not be considered to be his. I repeat, in Islamic law, a man is not considered to be the father of a child he has with a woman he's not married to. The illegitimate child doesn't take the father's name, the father doesn't have to pay anything for that child, and the illegitimate child is not eligible for inheritance. This really does emphasize Islamic law does not recognize such children as belonging to the father. Even if the father says the child is his, if the kid was born out of wedlock, the majority of scholars say the child will still not be recognized as his. So in Islamic law, lineage is preserved through legal and societal frameworks rather than biological certainty alone to maintain the social order. There's no dispute on this. This creates a serious legal issue because Allah said a man cannot marry his daughter. But if a daughter born out of wedlock is not his daughter, does this mean it's lawful for her father to marry her? In Al-Qurtubi's tafsir for 2554, he quotes a scholar who says that because a daughter is born out of wedlock is not legally the father's daughter, she was not included in the prohibition on intercourse with that daughter, as mentioned in Quran 4:23. This is according to the correct teaching of Islam, and he also says the view is this of Malik and al-Shafi. Malik and al-Shafi are two founders of the four Islamic schools of legal jurisprudence. That this really is a big thing. Al-Qurtubi, for his tafsir in 4:23, quote Malik, who says the correct view is that a child born as a result of zina is not forbidden for the father. Ibn Qudamah confirms that Malik and Shafi say a daughter born out of wedlock is permissible for the father. Imam Nawawi says the permissibility of an illegitimate daughter for her father is absolutely the correct view because he isn't the father. He does say it's disliked. Here's a modern statement by modern Shafi scholars confirming al-Shafi's view on a man having sex with his illegitimate daughter. Here's al-Shafi himself saying that a daughter born outside of marriage is not the daughter of the father. He says he would not annul the marriage of the father to his illegitimate child's daughters, and that a brother is not unlawful for his illegitimate sisters. So what he's actually saying is that the father can marry the children of his illegitimate daughter, so his granddaughters or granddaughters, and a brother can marry his illegitimate sister, so his sister. So it isn't just a father marrying his daughter, it's grandfathers marrying grandchildren and brothers marrying sisters, biological sisters. This scholar confirms al-Shafi's view and says a father's illegitimate daughter is lawful for him. He also points out that an illegitimate son can marry his brother's daughter, and points out that a legitimate daughter is permissible for her grandfather and her brother. So like I say, brothers can marry sisters, uncles can marry biological nieces, grandfathers can marry grandchildren, and fathers can marry daughters. Mardawi also confirms Shafi's view that marrying your legitimate daughter is lawful, and he says it's disliked due to dislike for acting upon disagreements amongst the scholars. So the issue is not a biological issue so much as it being an issue with disagreement amongst the scholars, which makes it disliked. That scholar also goes into detail about why the scholars who oppose a father marrying his illegitimate daughter are incorrect. This scholar agrees. This scholar agrees, and this scholar agrees. This is just a little summary of what you've already seen and the views supporting the idea that a father can marry his illegitimate daughter. So, this crazy scholar, who doesn't teach real Islam at all, may not be so crazy after all. When this scholar made this claim that a father can marry his illegitimate daughter, he was laughed at and mocked as not understanding Islam. It seems that maybe he understands Islam a bit better than them. So, whilst it's true that the majority of scholars claim a man cannot marry his illegitimate daughter, 2 of the 4 major Sunni schools permit it, citing a much stronger textual argument. The core issue is simple. Either the illegitimate daughter is legally considered his daughter, or she isn't, and Islamic law says she isn't. The law says an illegitimate daughter or child is severed from the father's lineage. So to claim that she is still prohibited from marrying him directly contradicts this framework, as it imposes a prohibition without acknowledging there are no ties of lineage between them to prevent it. Therefore, the claim that a legitimate daughter is lawful with her father because she is not legally his daughter is consistent with Islamic law. So apologists absolutely embarrass themselves by saying she is the father's daughter, but at the same time say she isn't. Allah's perfect law doesn't seem so perfect now, does it? In Islam, the heaven is called Jannah or paradise, and it's a place where you can have anything you want. It's pretty much sex-based. It's a cosmic brothel where you basically just have sex with virgin children, virgin girls, all day, every day. This scholar says in Islam's heaven, it will be permissible to marry or have intercourse with close relatives who are mahrams. So this refers to mothers, daughters, and sisters. This scholar points out that you can have anything you want in paradise. He does say that Kurtubi allegedly said this does not include your mother or daughter, but sisters are okay. Now, I would like any Muslim to point to me where it says that you cannot have sex with your mother, your daughter, or your sister in paradise. Now let's get to what I really wanted to talk about, Islam and first cousin incest. So in the Quran 4:2-3, Allah tells men what women are permissible. He does not say your cousins are forbidden. And because the Quran and Hadiths are silent on first cousin marriages and do not forbid them, and because Muhammad married his first cousin Zainab, means that marrying your first cousin is lawful in Islam. There is no dispute about this. In this book of fatwas, renowned scholars discuss certain issues, and a question is asked about concerns over marrying a cousin. Sheikh Uthaymeen, who's a very big scholar, says consider her religion and her beauty first, even if she's closely related, showing that first cousin marriages is not an issue. To get around this, apologists claim that first cousin marriages are not incest, where relationships between blood relatives are called consanguineous. And for a relationship to be considered blood-related or consanguineous, the interbreeding coefficient must be 0.056 or more. First cousins have an interbreeding coefficient of 0.0625 or more. 0.0625 is higher than 0.056. So according to the medical definition of blood relations, first cousins are blood relations. They share 12.5% of their genes. This makes first cousin relationships incest. Because Allah allows first cousin relationships and because Muhammad enjoyed it, first cousin incest rates are the highest in the Islamic world. This map shows the scale of the incest problem within the Islamic world. For example, the Islamic country with the lowest levels of incest is said to be Morocco, with rates of 10 to 19%. Turkey has 20 to 29%. In Syria and Iran, it's 30 to 39%. In Sudan and Afghanistan, rates are said to be 40 to 49%. This is on a national level. In Qatar and Saudi Arabia, rates are said to be 50 to 59%, whilst in Kuwait, it's as high as 68%. Pakistan is actually said to have the highest levels of first cousin incest, with over 60% of the population married to their blood relatives. This rises to an astonishing 80% in some rural areas. Now, the rates of incest among Arabs themselves is extremely high. And in Saudi Arabia, a father marrying off his son to his brother's daughter is a very popular and promoted type of cousin marriage in Arab culture. Because we see high rates of first cousin marriages amongst Arab Muslims, Persian Muslims, African Muslims, and Asian Muslims, we can see that this cross-cultural issue is a religious one. And we must remember that it's Islam that shapes the culture anyway. First cousin marriages double the risk of genetic disorders. Inherited blood disorders are particularly prevalent in first cousin relationships. And because of the high rates of first cousin marriages that continue with successive generations, the interbreeding ratio increases. This means many of these first cousins are actually more closely related by blood relations and share more of their DNA. This increases the risk of passing on diseases. For example, in a discussion on first cousin incest amongst Muslims, Ohad Bicker, a world-renowned geneticist, says the passing on of genetic diseases in communities practicing first cousin marriages goes up to 10%. This is over 3 times the risk as that in unrelated couples. He also found first cousin marriage rates in Bedouin Arabs was 60%. So Arabs themselves have a first cousin incest problem. When 2 siblings from one family have children with 2 siblings from another family, the children become double cousins. This means they have an interbreeding coefficient of 1.25, which is equal to a man marrying his brother's daughter or his biological niece. Islam allows this, and some Pakistanis do it. In Pakistan, 1 in 22 children die within 1 month of birth, which is the highest rate of child mortality in the world. Pakistan's high first cousin rates are linked to this heartbreaking statistic. Pakistanis are the largest immigrant and Muslim demographic in the UK. And in the UK city of Bradford, 37% of Pakistani babies were found to be born to first cousin parents. And rates of child deaths are highest in this group. They had twice the rates of congenital anomalies, with 31% of these defects being attributed to first cousin incest. In the UK city of Birmingham, the risks of congenital or genetic disorders were double amongst Pakistanis. They had a 13 times greater risk of recessive disorders, and they accounted for 33% of all genetic defects. 69% of Pakistanis were found to be married to their first cousin. In this study, 77% of Pakistani babies with birth defects were born to parents in first cousin marriages. This UK study found that Pakistani children were 3 times more likely to have post-neonatal birth defects or death. A study conducted on Bangladeshis compared the rates of 12 diseases in first cousin marriages to those who are unrelated. They found that children born to consanguineous marriages were 3 to 3.7 times more likely to have heart disease, kidney disease, mental retardation, and asthma. Overall risk of the 12 diseases were 2.8 times greater. So this is higher than the risk to a child from drinking 1 bottle of wine or smoking 10 cigarettes each day whilst pregnant. That's astonishing. This graph illustrates the scale of the issue. 22 of the 23 countries with the highest rates of birth defects were Islamic. The one country that wasn't Islamic still had a population of over 20% Muslim. In a borough of London that I personally have worked in, it was found that 1 in 5 deaths were in children born to first cousin parents. I saw with my own eyes that most children with neurological disorders and who required tube feeding were Muslims. Everyone I worked with were aware of the issue amongst Islamic communities, but no one said anything. So, first cousins are blood relatives. So Islam does allow incest. The Muslim world has the highest rates of incest, birth defects, and newborn deaths in the world. Muslim interbreeding is destroying Muslim lives, which should break the hearts of all of you. Rates of congenital disease are 2 to 3 times higher, and recessive disorders up to 13 times higher. Islam has a serious incest problem. Muslim and non-Muslim politicians are trying to cover it up. Don't let them. Doctors acknowledge the problem but refuse to say it's due to Islam. It has everything to do with Islam. And if we are not honest about it, this immoral tragedy will not stop. I care about Muslims and non-Muslims alike. We need to do something about it. It needs to be stopped. Anyway, this was Debunking Islam, and thank you for listening.